Okay then, so the first thing you need to do is obviously open up your world. I have a few worlds here. We'll open up this one. So obviously the first thing you need to do is design your rocket. So we are going to come into the VAB and going to make a quick rocket. It's going to be a very basic rocket. Going to get our command pod, parachute. I'm going to come into this tab here and grab this thing called a decoupler, which is going to allow us to detach our command pod from the rest of the rocket. So when it comes back down to Earth from orbit, it doesn't have this massive rocket landing with it. So the next thing we're going to do is add a fuel tank here. You can add sort of any size fuel tank you want. That's a bit smaller, that's a bit bigger, but for the rocket I'm going to use that tank there because it's just about the right size. Anything bigger than that, it's going to be a bit too much for the engine to push, and anything less than that, it's not really going to have enough fuel. Well, it probably will, but when you're starting out, you want to make sure you have plenty of fuel, so probably use that size fuel tank. We're going to go and grab another decoupler, and we're going to add a bigger fuel tank this time. I'm going to add this one, which is twice the size of the one we just added. We're going to move this rocket up a bit so we have some more room to work on. And we're going to put sort of a medium-sized engine on that. Then we're going to get another decoupler, put it down there. Get another one of those larger fuel tanks, and one of the medium-sized fuel tanks. And we're going to put another big engine on this one. So this is a little bit bigger than this one. The one that we put here was the LVT45, which has a max thrust of only 200, but the one we put down the bottom, this one here, has a max thrust of 215, which is a bit bigger. Now, 215 thrust isn't going to be enough to lift this entire rocket, so it's going to need a bit more help getting off the ground. So what we're going to do is get some radial decouplers, put our symmetry on 3, so it's placing 3 on our rocket, and place them about there, I think. Should be good. And then we're going to get something called a solid rocket booster, which you probably know what it is, an SRB. Which is basically going to help our rocket get off the ground. We're going to go into aerodynamic and grab an aerodynamic nose cone and put that on top of our solid rocket boosters so that they fly through the atmosphere a bit more aerodynamically. Then we have to check our staging. We want to make sure that our solid rocket boosters and our LV, whatever this engine is, goes off at the same time. So we're going to drag both these engines down into the same stage. Now these solid rocket boosters are going to run out of fuel before this one, so we're going to want these decouplers to drop off before we drop this stage here. So luckily it's automatically put that in the right place there. After we've hit space to activate this stage, it's going to drop these 3. And then after that, this whole stage is going to run out of fuel. And this decoupler is going to activate. And then this engine is going to activate. And then when that stage runs out of fuel, this one's going to decouple. And then this engine's going to activate. Then once we're done and we're heading back down to Earth, it's going to drop our sort of whatever's left of the rocket, and our command pod's going to come back, and then we're going to be able to activate the parachute. So let's launch our rocket. Okay, so here we are on the launch pad. We're going to hold shift to throttle up, and we're going to hit T to activate something called SAS. SAS is a stabilization control system which keeps your rocket pointing the way that you want it to point. So once we're throttled 100%, we can hit spacebar to activate all our engines. That's going to accelerate us very quickly up through the atmosphere and into space. Now when these solid rocket boosters drop off, maybe we probably should have put the next size solid rocket booster on, or we should have put 4 on. But I don't think it's going to matter. We're going to get to space today. We're going to get into orbit no matter. So we're just waiting for the solid rocket boosters to drop off, then we can hit space to stage them. Hitting space to drop them off. As you can see, our speed is dropping quite dramatically because we just lost a lot of thrust off the side of our rocket. But this engine is how we're now through most of the thick part of the atmosphere. Right here you can see this bit here is the thicker part, this is thinner, and then this is basically where there's no air whatsoever, so we're almost through the thick part of the atmosphere. Now you're probably going to want to keep going up until this stage runs out of fuel, but if we get too high before it runs out of fuel, then we're going to need to start leaning over. If we get to 16,000 before this runs out, then we're going to need to start leaning over, which it looks like we're going to need to do. So we're going to hold D to lean our rocket to the right, and we're going to keep on leaning it over until we get to this marking right here that we're on right now. And we're going to hold it there at that 90-degree angle. And our stage is about to run out. Hit space to drop that, and hit space to activate our next stage. Now what we're going to do now is hit M to come into the map, and we're launching on the dark side of Kerbin at the moment, and we're going to wait until our apoapse, which is the highest point in our space flight above the surface of Kerbin, or whatever body you are currently trying to orbit, we're going to wait till that gets to 100,000. So we're going to bring up our, whatever this is, gyroscope, and just wait for this to get to 100,000. Now, just in case you were wondering, you can hit X to cut your engine immediately instead of holding control to throttle down. You can hold control to throttle down and shift to throttle up, but you can just hit X to immediately cut the engine. So that's almost at 100,000. Kerbin's atmosphere ends at 70,000, so you can have a stable orbit at 70,000 meters, but it's, I don't know, it's pretty close to Kerbin, so we're going to come to 100,000, seeing as how we have enough fuel to go there. So we're going to time warp. Next to the M button, there's the two arrow keys. By clicking the right arrow that's pointing to the right, we can increase time and sort of warp up to the apoapse. Now, while we're in the atmosphere, we can only time warps up to 4 times, but once we're out of the atmosphere, you can come back down to 1 times, and we can go far beyond that. So you want to time warp to apoapse, then activate your engine, burning just above the horizon. Now basically what you're trying to do is keep this apoapse marker right on top of your rocket. So if it's falling behind you, you need to raise your nose above the atmosphere, above the horizon just a little bit. So if it goes behind you, and that's we're out of fuel now. So hit space, and we'll activate the next stage. So if that's falling behind you, you need to tilt your rocket upwards above the horizon. You need to tilt it up just a bit more. And if it goes in front of you, like it's about to, if it goes in front of you, you need to tilt down. And yeah, you basically just want to keep that right on top of your rocket. That's what you're aiming to do. Cat, go away. Go away, cat. So it's falling in front of us now. We're going to lean forwards a bit. Now basically you're waiting until this ring completely goes around Kerbin. Now you can see our periapse there. Our periapsis is the lowest point in our orbit. So you can see our periapse is 45,000 meters. So that's still inside the atmosphere. So we're going to sling around, and we're going to fall back down into the atmosphere. So this is not a stable orbit. We want to continue burning until our periapse and our apoapse are about the same. And you can see they're sort of swinging over. And that's how you know that they're as close as they're going to get, pretty much. So our periapse, the lowest point in our flight, is at 98,000 meters, and our apoapse, the highest point in our flight, is at 102,000 meters. So you can see there that we are in a stable orbit. We can time warp all around Kerbin. yeah, we can time warp. So the recording just stopped there, but we will continue where we left off. Time warping around Kerbin as we are in orbit. We're on the light side of Kerbin now. You can see the planet. We're very close. So when you want to deorbit, you want to find this symbol here. I'll teach you what these two symbols are. This one here, this is called the prograde, and that is basically the direction that your rocket is heading. The symbol here, this is the direction that your rocket is pointing. See, I can point this rocket in any direction that I want, but no matter where I point it, our rocket will continue to fly in this direction. And prograde is basically the opposite of that. It's basically the, I don't know, where your rocket came from, or the opposite of where it's heading. So basically, if you burn prograde, that is going to slow you down, and it is going to bring your periapsis down. So if we time warp to our apoapsis, which is the highest point in our orbit, and we burn retrograde to slow ourselves down, you can see our speed here, slow ourselves down, that's going to bring our periapsis down. So we want to continue to bring our periapsis down, and we're going to try and land somewhere in the ocean here. Now, just some advice. Water on Kerbin is one of the more evil things. It is quite glitchy. Now, we don't need this rocket anymore, we don't need this stage, so we're going to drop that. And we have our pod, our command pod, heading back down to the surface. Yes, as I was saying, water is quite evil. If you try and land a large ship in water, which I don't know why you would do, but if you try and land anything more than just a command pod, then chances are it's going to get swallowed up by the ocean, and it's very glitchy. Whoops. Because we're time warping right now, our rocket is having a bit of a spasm, so we're going to press T to turn computer controls off, and that means that the capsule is free to drift however it wants. But as soon as we turn computer controls on, it's going to lock the rocket into where we want it to go. So we basically want to point our heat shield, the base or whatever of our rocket, of our command pod, down to the atmosphere, so while we come in, we don't burn up in the atmosphere. So we can time warp now because we're in the atmosphere, and you can see our rocket is starting to heat up now. Because there's a lot of air now, we can turn computer controls off, and all the air rushing past the rocket will keep it sort of stable. It'll keep it in this position. I don't need to use electric charge to keep my rocket pointed the right way, because all the air rushing past it is going to keep it that way. Obviously, if I were to flip my rocket around so that this point was sort of flying through the atmosphere first, it would stay that way as well, because that's a very aerodynamic position. But while we're in the exact opposite of that, it's not going to flip around. The air flying past our capsule is going to keep it quite stable. So we can time warp all the way back down to the ocean now. And we can hit spacebar to fire our parachute when we find necessary, which is probably going to be about 3,000 meters. We're going to pop our parachute right now. And that's going to fully open up and deploy at 500 meters. This are we still time warping? No. This altimeter is meters above sea level. So while you're landing on land, it's going to be anywhere from 100 meters to 2,000 meters off. So as you can see, because we're above the ocean right now, this altimeter is going to be 100% correct. It deployed at 500 meters. But if we were above land, that was say 500 meters above sea level, the parachute would have popped open at 1,000 meters. So that's just something to note there. So we can time warp on down to the ocean and hopefully make a soft landing and not be gobbled up by the glitchy water. And touchdown. Embury Kerman has made a successful trip to orbit and back. We can hit this button up here to recover the vessel and give it and some celebrations because it was a very successful mission. That's how to get into orbit. I'm probably gonna do a video on building a rocket and then like orbital mechanics, like how you change your orbit and shit, and like what everything in the game does, like batteries and electricity and space planes, because you can make planes that go into space and yeah, stuff like that. I'll teach you some other stuff. Okay.